ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
I'm Julia Baird.
And I'm Jeremy Fernandez, and this week on Not Stupid,
I've been binging the drama Adolescence, along with, one or two or millions of others.
and we have some thoughts.
So many.
About masculinity, about boys, and how we talk about men. You can find our episode on the ABC Listen app.
A budget, a tax cut, and soon an election. So, where do the major parties sit in the minds of voters ahead of a federal poll? And what issues will they really be voting on? Today, political editor for ABC's 7:30, Laura Tingle, on what the major parties need to do to win. I'm Sam Hawley on Gadigal land in Sydney. This is ABC News Daily. Laura, we've been offered a tax cut, so an election must be coming, right?
Oh, Sam, you're such a cynic.
It's a pretty typical move, though, isn't it, for a government to offer up a tax cut or a handout of some sort before a poll?
The government is proud to be delivering more tax relief. These additional tax cuts are modest, but they will make a difference.
What this does is build on the tax cuts that we've delivered just this year. It's a top-up.
It's not like it's the first time this has happened.
It's not the first time it's happened. I think the interesting things about this, though, are, I sort of regard the $17 billion tax cut as one of the world's biggest neon signs.
Yeah.
Because everybody's saying, oh, look, it's not worth a sandwich and a milkshake and all those things. But I think what the idea was that, I don't know whether they were originally planning to have a tax cut or whether they were going to announce a tax cut in the election. We didn't think this budget was going to happen. Either way, though, the point about it is it gave the budget a story, which it was sort of lacking. It needed some sort of punch through. It's really something that I think they've used to sort of say, hello, all of you really disengaged or angry voters, here's something that might at least capture attention long enough for us to say to you, we're doing all this other stuff for you.
Did it catch the coalition, do you think, off guard? It was a bit of a surprise.
Look, I think it has caught the coalition completely off guard. Now, Angus Taylor was all over the shop saying, oh, well, we don't support these tax cuts. We're promising other tax things like small business, which obviously sounds a pretty, weak sort of response. Then was sort of suggesting that the coalition may have its own tax cut package.
Let's be absolutely clear. The opposition will not be offering tax cuts as part of its budget and reply as part of its election campaign policies.
That's not what I said. I said we do not support what Labor is putting forward today.
Peter Dutton has also shown that the coalition is a bit snookered on this because he opened it up by saying, well, by spending all this money on tax cuts, the interest bill on the deficits is going to be astronomical and it's inflationary. Well, if that's the case, they can't be doing them as well, you would think.
It's obviously a budget for the next 5 weeks. It's an election bribe. It's not a document that is going to serve our country well over the next 5 years. And that's the decision the government's made to try and win favour with the public in the run-up to an election, but it's not actually about...
And the other thing that was notable about that interview was that at the first possible opportunity, Peter Dutton sort of segued into energy prices, international security, into migration. Like he was off saying, let's talk about these other things. They really don't know what to do about this.
And what is obvious is that there's just red ink everywhere across this budget for as far as the eye can see. There is Labor debt, and Labor debt now will extend to $1 trillion in this budget. And not only that, the impact on housing, for example, bringing in 2 million people over a year, bringing in 2 million people additional, that is having a massive impact.
The government has basically said, right, we're going to try to corner the coalition on this. It's moved the legislation to legislate the tax cuts.
The federal opposition has voted against the government's planned tax cuts that would save taxpayers $10 a week by mid-2027. The cuts, which would cost the budget $17 billion, have passed Parliament's lower house despite the coalition's opposition. They'll now move.
So what do you think, though, Laura? Do tax cuts win over voters?
Well, they do if you don't offer them.
Yes.
The coalition is sort of implying that its language for the last 3 years has been the government spending like crazy, and we want to be really fiscally responsible and not spend the money. Now, they're now stuck because they've, of course, been backing a lot of the things that the government's been doing so far, like Medicare, bulk billing measures and the like in the last few weeks. But what do they do now? If they don't back these and they continue with their rhetoric about being fiscally responsible, people might sort of be cynical about the tax cuts, but are they going to say no to them? I'm not sure that they will.
All right, so Laura, let's turn now to the election campaign, because of course we know that Anthony Albanese any moment now will be calling the election and naming the date. Let's have a look at what to expect from the major parties. Political watchers think that Peter Dutton has lost a fair bit of momentum in recent weeks, right? He'll be hoping to regain that. Just tell me what's happened.
Well, I think what's happened is Peter Dutton's managed to sort of keep out of the public eye for a lot of the last 3 years. When the Prime Minister ramped up the campaigning in January, Peter Dutton matched him, and it turned out that he's not very good on his feet, particularly responding to issues about the economy and the budget. It's never been his natural milieu. The assessments about nuclear policy have also changed. You'll notice that the coalition doesn't mention its nuclear policy anymore. It just talks about an energy policy in other terms. So both he and Angus Taylor are having terrible troubles articulating what their position is, given, as we've said, that they're making contradictory statements about what their economic policy is, and because essentially a lot of the things that were running against the government aren't running against them so much now. I mean, it's not, happy days are here again, but interest rates have started to fall and the economy hasn't gone into recession. So the government's got a credible story to tell, even if people are pretty grumpy. Unless the coalition can find a way of breaking out and really doing something profoundly different that sticks together, they're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, and his budget in reply speech, Peter Dutton's, on Thursday evening, that's going to be pretty crucial, right?
It's going to be really crucial. All the indications have been that they were going to be talking about things like the migration numbers. But I think there is now this huge pressure on Peter Dutton internally as well as externally to sort of say, well, yes, I actually do have some policies. People have noticed that he doesn't have any policies to speak of, and he's going to have to produce something to show that he's got something to talk about for the next 5 weeks.
Because there was a thought that he was sort of using a Trump tactic, if you like, of, putting a heap of sort of thought bubbles out there, right?
Yeah.
That wasn't really working for him. Just tell me about that. What was he doing?
Well, I think it was working for him, and he was just, he was pressing all the buttons. He's saying, energy prices are really terrible. We will make energy prices better. Just you wait and see. But, of course, now people are saying, well, what are you going to do? Now he's put out a nuclear policy which he won't talk about because it's really unpopular. There's been the floating in the last few days of an energy gas reservation. That's the idea that companies would be forced to withhold some gas for local producers. But, a couple of things have happened there. The gas crisis that was expected to hit at some time, I think this year, has actually been delayed by the official forecasters. They're saying, well, look, actually we're getting through okay on the current gas production figures. So it's one of those things where they've kept on going to these sort of ideas about national security, energy and migration, which are his natural comfort zone. But he's going to have to say something about it. Even on migration, he said that they'll get net overseas migration down to 160,000 at various points, and that they'd get permanent migration down to 140,000 without saying how on earth they're actually going to do it. He's basically gambled everything on the idea that resentment about the economy in combination with these sort of feels issues, if you like, would be enough to get him over the line. And he's now 5 or 6 weeks from an election. And in fact, people are saying, well, that's all very well, but what are you going to do for us?
Yeah, he even came up with this idea, didn't he, for a referendum on criminals being able to be stripped of their citizenship.
Yeah.
That's popular, is it, among voters? I mean, is he serious about that?
Well, I think, once again, it was appealing to that sort of hot button issue about people wanting, you know, if you say, I want to keep the country safe, everybody will say yes.
I want a mandate from the Australian people to be able to implement the laws which are necessary to keep us safe. The Prime Minister dismisses it as a thought bubble. So we're suggesting here that if we can tighten the laws, we do that as a last resort. If there's a change to the Constitution required, we can have that discussion.
But it's one of those things where if you take away the question of what's the content of the proposed referendum he was suggesting and look at the sorts of arguments he used against the voice apropos without the content, he said it was too expensive, that people should be talking about the cost of living, not the voice. The same arguments are then being turned back on him, and people are saying, well, wait a minute, why are you talking about this? The issue is a cost of living. So that sort of disappeared without trace as well.
Well, Laura, let's turn to the government then, because from everything that was being said, we are meant to be in the middle of an election campaign already. That was delayed, of course, because of ex-cyclone Alfred. That has worked, has it, in Anthony Albanese's favour at this point?
I think it has. A lot of commentators were saying, this was a disaster that this happened, that, he should have been at the polls to make the most of the last interest rate cut and so forth. But just given the implosion on the coalition side, I think it's worked for Anthony Albanese. It has given the government this platform, which they've, I think, used effectively of the budget to refocus people's attention on the cost of living relief they've offered to date via the tax cut. So it has worked for them so far. One of the problems, of course, for the people who get into the technicalities of these things is that, say he calls the election on Saturday, there will be this week in the middle of the campaign, which will stem from the Thursday before or Good Friday right through to the following week and to the following Monday because of Anzac Day, when people will be off on holidays in very large numbers. But I think, some people would say that the best week Anthony Albanese had last campaign was when he had COVID, which is a little bit unkind. But
Yes.
but I think it has worked for him so far.
Yeah, all right. And the message that the government will keep pushing, is it just cost of living over and over again? Is that the message that voters want to hear, or is there something more to it?
Look, I think it's, we're doing stuff about the cost of living, that the economy has turned the corner, that our strategy was right when everybody said it wasn't right, that we should be spending money to help people. There was so much criticism of them for doing that, including from the opposition. So they are focused on the major issue that's affecting most people. Having said that, there are a couple of things which are completely incomprehensible as strategy, including the Prime Minister's intervention in the salmon issue in Tasmania, which is now, thanks to rather unpleasant globules of fat and dead fish turning up on people's beaches, is now broadened out and gone national and focused people's minds, for those who are interested in this issue, on the fact that rather than doing more on environment laws, Labor's actually looking at peeling them back a bit.
All right. Well, as you say, we're about to head into a 5 or 6 week campaign. Can things change remarkably during that period, do you think, Laura? Or does it really look like the government is on track at this point to win this election?
Oh, I wouldn't be calling that at this stage, Sam. Okay. Stuff happens. And look, yes. I think we have to wait to see what the budget reply is. Maybe the coalition will stun us and we'll find out that they have got some incredibly well-costed and detailed really alternative policy that captures people's imaginations and that they can articulate and argue the case for that package, which are two big provisos. And stuff happens in campaigns. That's what is so notable about them, like the now Prime Minister not being able to remember crucial details in the last campaign, which had a huge impact on the momentum and dynamics of the campaign.
Laura Tingle is the political editor for the ABC's nightly current affairs program, 7:30. This episode was produced by Sydney Peed and Adair Shepherd. Audio production by Sam Dutton. Our supervising producer is David Cody. I'm Sam Hawley. Thanks for listening.